Order. To the petition. I call the member for Heathcote.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I lead on behalf of Jai Rao from Wallandilly as he has had to head back to his electorate due to fires. He wanted to place on the record he's working hard to protect the catchment and will be working in State Parliament in the coming weeks to ensure that the catchment is protected. This is the statement that Mr Rao asked me to read on his behalf. New South Wales Government is committed to protecting the water quality of Sydney's drinking water and the health and catchment. As such, we have a range of strong policies in place to protect our catchment, including a state environmental planning policy for the Sydney water catchment, which requires all proposed developments must have a neutral or beneficial effect on water quality. All users, including mining and coal seam gas companies, must comply with the requirements of the Sydney Water Catchment Management Act 1998 and the regulation which enables the Sydney Catchment Authority to impose conditions on the way the catchments are used and if and are access is granted. Our aquifer interference policy is the strongest in Australia, and it puts New South Wales well ahead of any other jurisdiction when it comes to groundwater protection in Australia. It specifically protects aquifers and groundwater through the number of measures including water licensing and minimal impact requirements. BTEX chemicals and CSG fracking fluids are banned. Our rigorous state significant assessment systems, for the instance the Planning Assessment Commission earlier this year refused to propose for a CSG exploration boreholes within the Sydney water catchments. If you'd like more details, please look at the PAC New South Wales Government website. We're committed to ensuring a proper and adequate protection of the state's rivers, streams, aquifers, groundwater and vital catchments. CSG regulations in February 2013, New South Wales Premier announced the range of new measures to ensure the CSG operations are appropriately regulated across New South Wales, which include a proposed 2-kilometre exclusion zone around residential areas to prevent CSG exploration, assessment and production activities, covering both surface and underground works, impacting on communities. Exclusion zones to apply to identical crucial industry clusters such as viticulture and equine industries. The EPA is now responsible for the environmental regulation of all coal seam gas operations and have been given additional resources to focus on CSG. All CSG operation, exploration, assessment and production must hold an environment protection licence from the EPA. This licence includes the strict conditions designed to protect the environment and safeguard ground and surface water from pollution. Through mechanisms, they ensure that the state's water catchments are protected. The licence includes requirements for companies to monitor the environment and any emissions. The result of this monitoring must be publicly available and must be reported to the EPA. This provides the community with a transparent regulatory system. New South Wales Government exclusion zones, the strict regulatory framework, are non-negotiable, and we are requiring the industry to meet the New South Wales Government's best practice standards. New South Wales public can be confident that gas extraction activities with unacceptable impacts will not be approved in New South Wales. 44 CSG exploration or production licences were approved during the 16 years of the former Labor government. Labor approved the renewal of CSG exploration licence with no community awareness or input, with no concerns for agriculture or environmental impacts, and no consideration for potential impact on our drinking water. 6 petroleum exploration licences, or PELs, have been granted, and 10 PELs were renewed during the period of John Robertson was the Minister for the former government, September 09 to March 11. In September 2009, the ALP government issued a planning approval for the Apex Energy for 15 exploration boreholes in the Darks Forest area, 11 of which are located within drinking water catchments. I thank you for your time coming in today, and I recommend this to the House. Thank you.
Further to the petition, I call the member for Keira.
Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. Look, can I start off by thanking the men and women in the gallery, the communities of the Northern Illawarra and other parts of New South Wales for what has been, I think, one of the best campaigns I have ever seen. I want to pay particular thanks to Jess Moore and Chris Williams for their leadership, their input, their assistance and their advocacy on behalf of the community that I love and behalf of the community that I call my home. Can I just say that very rarely, Madam Acting Speaker, in opposition do you get good days. I've said to many people that opposition is full of very, very dark and bad days, and it's not exactly where you want to be as a Member of Parliament. But today, in this place, this morning, we saw a very, very good day, because today we saw New South Wales Labor make right a wrong. Make right a wrong that occurred prior to the last election. A wrong that was to allow CSG exploration and extraction to take place in some of the most sensitive lands this community has available to it. A wrong that should never have happened. A wrong that I said from the moment that I was pre-selected in that electorate of Keira was something that I intended on fighting to stop. Today in the New South Wales Parliament, John Robertson introduced a bill that allows or protects Sydney water catchment area from coal seam gas extraction forever and a day. That is what should have happened some years ago. But my mother always said to me that two wrongs don't make a right. My mum always said to me, when you got it wrong, stand up, say it, and then do what you can to fix it. Because most Australians know mistakes can happen. And we made a mistake, and I haven't walked away from it. In fact, I was punished for it significantly in the last election. An 18% swing in the seat of Keira, the seat now on a knife edge. We lost the seat of Heathcote. Those seats are like that because of decisions made like what was to do with CSG. I accept that, but I could have come into this place and sat silent and said, well, technically it's not in the electorate of Keira, but I didn't. I have made it my commitment and my passion since March 2011 to see New South Wales Labor correct a wrong and to introduce in this place legislation that will protect the most precious of all natural resources, and that is safe, clean drinking water. A resource that millions of people around the world don't have access to. A resource that we take for granted here in New South Wales and this country probably too much, but a resource that I think is worth protecting, and that I think is worth protecting that much that politicians like me should be bold enough to say we got it wrong and then to work darn hard to fix it again. Today in the New South Wales Parliament, John Robertson went a long way to fixing the wrong of the past. But that wrong can only be fixed if we are joined with this by the New South Wales Government. The legislation is now tabled. The debate will be coming on soon. The time for talk is over. The legislation is in the oldest parliament in this country. We, as community leaders, have an opportunity to protect our drinking water supply. We don't have to do anything except honour the commitments that they made prior to the last elections. No ifs, no buts, a guarantee. That's what was asked for, that's what was expected, and in a week or so's time, it will be expected of us to pass this legislation without any fanfare, without any carry-on, as a simple way to protect that water and to protect the water catchment area, not just for our generation, but for my son's generation, to ensure that our most precious resource is given the utmost priority in the oldest parliament in New South Wales. This is time for us to put our political swords down and to say mistakes have happened in the past, they've happened recently, but together we can correct this. I want to thank each and every one of you for the fight and determination you have shown to one of the most important issues ever to be debated in the New South Wales Parliament.
call the member for Wakehurst and the Minister for Planning and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Madam Acting Speaker, I thank the House for the opportunity to say a few words and to the community for raising their concerns in regard to ensuring that our water catchments are safeguarded. The issue of access to coal seam gas has been a mighty challenge for the government in its 2.5 years in office. I well recollect that when we came to government, there was about 6% of all of the state's gas coming from coal seam gas in the southwest of Sydney. And it had been produced there for the best part of 2 decades, substantially over the former, very lengthy period of the Labor government. And it seemed to the new government, that is the coalition government, that there were serious issues that needed to be addressed in satisfying the community's concerns, satisfying our concerns, that the appropriate measures were in place. So, Madam Speaker, Mr. Acting Speaker, now, we embarked on an exercise that sought to turn on its head the previous 2 decades of the Labor government not doing anything to put in place the appropriate safeguards, and we drew in as many members of the community as we could. I personally, as the Minister for Planning, had numerous meetings with community members and numerous meetings with stakeholder groups, including those particularly interested in the water issues, particularly interested in our strategic agricultural lands, those interested in the equine industry, in the viticulture industry, and I might say with all of the environment groups. And it was a challenge because people were never going to all agree to the final best way forward. But it was a difficult period. We put a stay, of course, on the Energy Minister put a stay on new exploration licences while we tried to develop the necessary procedures. As a result, we have made announcements including the introduction of the new Gateway Scientific Panel. And the Scientific Panel, and certainly there's no influence there from government, and I can assure all the residents here, all the members of the gallery, that whilst you may not agree with exactly where we've got to, we have tried very hard in the last 2.5 years to bring into play the necessary safeguards that we didn't think were there, the community didn't think were there. And of course, particularly with regard to water, the aquifer interference policy, which didn't exist before, the Water Management Act. I will recollect public servants telling me, Minister, that was all very subjective until this government came along and started putting in place the objective criteria. We are continuing to try and do more in this area, and we will continue to try and ensure that residents have the assurances they need at the same time as we can access the resources that belong to the taxpayers.
Mr. Temporary Speaker.
The House will now proceed with discussion on the 10,000 or signature petition. I call the member for Balmain.
Mr. Temporary Speaker, there are only a few minutes for me to contribute to this debate, but I would like to make 2 very clear points. The Leader of the Opposition, Barry O'Farrell, made a very clear commitment. Quote, "The next Liberal National Government will ensure that mining cannot occur in any water catchment area and will ensure that mining leases and mining exploration permits reflect that common sense. No ifs, no buts, a guarantee." That is the heart of the petition, which the people here in this community and the people across New South Wales have fought for. Simply fought that the Minister, the Opposition Leader at that time, now Premier, stick to this commitment that he made around CSG. It's simply that. And that's what this community is looking for. And we know, for example, that there have been significant issues in regard to water. In fact, despite the New South Wales Department of Planning and Infrastructure recommending approval for Apex Energy's 16 CSG well project, the Planning Assessment Commission in fact refused it. So the Planning Assessment Commission has got something right on this matter, and they highlighted quite clearly in their determination, which made it very clear when they said there are, quote, "still uncertainties surrounding the risks and potential impacts of coal seam gas activities and policies relating to coal seam gas activities are currently evolving." So it's clear there's ongoing problems with water. The government hasn't adhered to the commitment, and that's why I'm here to speak to thank those people in the community that fought so hard to get 10,000 signatures, and their campaign has done something very important as well. Not only has it helped turn government policy, it's helping to turn around the ship on Labor policy, so they can be supportive of the community. Now, we've heard the discussion about this bill about protecting water. It protects special areas in the Sydney catchment area, a very limited amount of areas, but it's a good start. It's a good start because in order for us to have the full and proper protection against the worst elements of CSG gas exploration, we need the community on board. Of course, the Greens are on board. We need the best elements of Labor to be fighting that position inside their own party. And we need also to encourage and cajole and push the industry and, of course, the coalition to make sure we can have the strongest possible protections, because under the former government, as you all know, the protections were horrific. And we've made some progress, but there is still much more to go. And I just wanted to conclude, Mr Temporary Speaker, to highlight one final important fact, that we, I think, now have had 3 10,000 signature petitions in this House on this matter. Unprecedented commitment by people to express people's views in the community. And a recent Essential poll indicated 87% of people support banning coal mining and coal seam gas activity in water catchment areas within 2 kilometres of rivers and wetlands. It's not just good enough for the viticulture industry, not just good enough for the horse stud and equine industry. It's important that all people are protected, and the protections we get in the city should be extended to the country, and most importantly, our water catchments should be protected not just for us, but also for the environmental protections that are so critical, and also for the drinking water of all of Sydney and our community.
Is the member for Sydney seeking leave?
Yes, I seek
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. I call the member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I'd like to start by welcoming and thank those in the gallery for their great work in gathering another 10,000 petition and for showing the strong visual presence today to show their opposition to coal seam gas mining in water catchment areas. I support the request of over 10,000 petitioners for a ban on coal seam gas mining in water catchment areas. Mining activities can have a devastating permanent impact on water systems. Adjacent land is cleared and degraded, removing vital habitat for ecosystems that sustain clean and healthy water. Pollution from dust and chemicals contaminates the water, making it unsafe to drink and further harming the ecosystems. Cracked riverbeds from mining activity can cause subsidence, reducing the amount of clean water reaching catchments. In February, the state government approved expansion in the Derridribbleum mine for longwalls under 12 upland swamps within the Avon Dam, which supplies 8 to 9% of Sydney's drinking water. Upland swamps filter contaminants from the water before it reaches the catchment, and subsidence and cracking could drain and pollute these swamps. The Sydney Catchment Authority and the Office of Environment and Heritage say remediation of these swamps is unlikely. Swamps are vital to the health of our catchments and should not be put at risk. In fact, the 4 mines already operating in the Sydney metropolitan areas drain about 3 billion litres of water from Sydney's supply each year. Coal seam gas exploration licences also exist across Sydney's 5 big drinking water catchments. I share concern with the petitioners that these should not be developed into full mines. Contaminated water stores for coal seam gas mining could burst or overflow and pollute the catchments. Coal seam gas mining is a heavy-duty industrial activity that has no place in the delicate ecosystem of our water supplies. The Sydney Catchment Authority wants coal seam gas banned from catchment-designated special areas because it could significantly compromise their values, as well as longwall mining near major lakes and reservoirs. Sydney's water catchment provides drinking water to 4.5 million people in the Sydney Illawarra region. The Metropolitan Strategy predicts that by 2031, Sydney will need to accommodate an extra 1.3 million people. Securing a large supply of safe, clean drinking water will be essential to the quality of life in the face of a growing population. We should not risk the integrity of Sydney's water catchment for short-term mining profits. Contamination is not something that can be safely fixed. The state government has moved to ban new coal seam gas within 2 kilometres of residential areas and has initiated an independent review of coal seam gas activities by the chief scientist and engineer. These are good first steps, and I oppose proposals by the federal government to intervene and fast-track coal seam gas approvals. The state government should go further to also ban mining and coal seam gas activities in and adjacent to drinking water catchments. Our water catchments provide an essential and irreplaceable service, and any risk should be banned, not managed.
Thank the member for Sydney. Can I thank the gallery for coming here today and being so respectful of the debate. The reason why these petitions were introduced was so that communities could bring forward things that they are concerned about to the floor of the House for debate and to hear what both sides have to say on the debate. So on behalf of all members of the House, thank you for bringing forward the petition.